Yeah. Okay.
So, good afternoon, Michelle. It is the 7th of April. We're well into April. We've been through Mad March, now we're into April. Um,
Yeah.
Still, well, we'll talk about today what's happening. But first and foremost, how are you doing?
So I'm doing really well, Catherine. Um, I went to the supermarket this morning, as I was just explaining to you, and everybody is walking around still with their masks on. So there doesn't seem to be any movement, at least out in the countryside. How are you getting on where you're living?
It's really mixed, When I go into the garages, the local shop, the supermarkets, absolutely everyone's wearing a mask. But because I live in the countryside, when I meet the neighbours, everyone's chatting and everything is
Yeah.
normal. Some are keeping their distance and a lot aren't. But certainly, the difference is around here is everyone's completely masked up, but they're not walking around the streets in masks. Very few people are. They're putting them on and off as they go into the shop. And I've not had any nasty comments or trouble at all. Whereas I know you and some other people in London, some of my friends in London have had really bad experiences. So again, it seems to be very different energies depending where you are, in terms of what it is, but I'm not seeing any improvement in terms of people, the general public, not wearing masks and things at all.
Well, I bought this little van over Easter, a little Mazda Bongo to get sort of go away in the summer.
Fab.
And I was really lucky that the person that sold it to me was able to bring it to my house. And, he showed me around the whole van, which is not big. A Mazda Bongo is just a little tiny van. I don't know how me and the four dogs are actually all going to sleep in it, but, that's a story for another day. But he was showing me around all the what everything does. We had no masks on. We didn't even mention it. I
Yeah,
think it just depends on, sometimes it's to do with the age group of the person that you're dealing with. And I suppose just the general area that you're in, however, how many people are managing to start doing that and start a culture of, moving forward. But, as I said, we were in a close proximity looking over this vehicle, and it was like both of us had actually just forgotten in that moment, unless
yeah,
somebody is actually doing it in front of you, you're just in your old ways, you don't think about
yeah,
it.
exactly. And let's hope that things do change soon, because otherwise it's going to be so ingrained in people. I mean, I just took my son back this morning. That's why I rushed back for this,
Yes, I
to
know.
uni, and I stopped off at the motorway services and went in. But
Yes.
what did surprise me, again, no one said anything to me, but I was literally the only person without a mask. But
Yeah.
loads of the children have masks on as
Yeah.
well.
I
That
don't.
was horrible to see, even young children with
Yeah.
masks on, not just teenagers.
I know what I want to say to you while we're talking about children. The boat at the Suez Canal, the Ever Given.
Yeah.
I know that a lot of channelers have been saying, and remote viewers have been saying, that they've been bringing children out of there that are in a bad way. I've actually had a different message to that, actually. I'm not saying that that route in the past hasn't been used for that. I think
Mm.
we all know that it has. But I think that the latest fiasco with the boat getting caught in the water, and then obviously all the media attention, or lack of, I should say, but the attention on that boat is just to bring attention to what's been going on in the past.
Mm.
So when I have remote viewed it, and when I've looked at that situation presently, there are no children being harmed at this time. Because if you think
On that
about
boat.
on that boat,
Yeah.
and I think that any footage or photographs or evidence that says differently is not from the current day. I think it's going back as far as 3 years or longer. So I think that particular route, I'm not saying all the trafficking
Mm.
routes are the same, but I think that particular trafficking route was shut down some years ago, probably right at the beginning of the Trump administration. And I think what people are doing in the truther community are, there might be two things going on. Firstly, they might be remotely viewing that piece of land, and they're seeing an energetic that's remaining from the past. So they're
Yeah.
kind of looking over there, and they're seeing the energy of something that has happened. So it's made an imprint there, so you can see that that was the history of it, but it's not necessarily happening right now. And secondly, it might be that while they're still giving out that story as if it's happening today, then it helps people that don't know what's going on to realize how serious, this trafficking is, and the routes that they use. But in terms of that particular ship that day, having children or adults or anything of that nature on there, I don't think that's the case. So I know that's good news obviously. It makes sense to me because I don't think the white hats, after all this time, who would know a particular route would allow that to happen. They're not going to allow children to be harmed or adults to be harmed where they know there is an actual route being used. And I think that would have been shut down, some time ago. So I think it's good that that story's all surfaced and, everybody is looking at it and talking about it. But I really wanted to let people know that as far as I'm aware, to the best of my ability with my remote viewing skills and my channelings, that they're saying to me that no children were harmed on this occasion. It's very likely that the second option about where they were saying that they found weapons or something, I'm not quite sure what sort of weapons they were. That's more likely. That is a possibility. But again, that could have been planted as part of the whole, what they're trying to do, so that they could stop the ship legitimately and search it. So I think that's good news, on all levels, that we can say, or I can say or feel, that there aren't any children that have recently been harmed, that particular trafficking line has been shut down. But the way in which they've used that particular story to raise awareness, I think that's amazing. What do you think about that, Catherine?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I was just speaking to another friend earlier on today about this. I haven't seen any credible, and obviously, when I'm talking about credible, I'm not talking about mainstream media,
No,
but I
no,
haven't seen any sort of credible from the normal truth sources
no.
information about stuff coming out from there. And I cannot believe, with all the awareness now, that if there was something like that, we wouldn't have pictures. There's a lot of pictures circulating that aren't current, and one of the things I also am interested in is there's a lot of pictures circulating from France about the police laying down their weapons, and I'm interested to know whether that's current or old, because getting mixed messages on that as well. So I feel that definitely. I suppose on the child trafficking thing, the thing that's really confusing me, based on the fact of the white hats not letting that sort of thing happen anymore, is what on earth's happening at the border, at the Mexican border. Because I
Yeah.
did see some very credible reports of, people actually getting in and filming some of the stuff, undercover people filming, and that looked really horrific. So then you see that and you're thinking, well, how can they be in control of that bit and not in charge of that bit? And that does raise sort of alarm bells for me, really.
I think the thing is, it's about whether the evidence is current or from the past. And again, with the Mexican border, I know that they're saying there's a lot of activity going on there. And I did see something where some parents seem to be dropping two children over the wall. But again, my feeling about that is that's being stopped at the border by the white hats, because I cannot believe for 1 minute that anything to do with Biden is actually really real. To be fair, I think that's all just a storyline, like we keep getting told. And in fact, I heard more information today on the Charlie Ward channel about the lady that goes to the Atlanta studios. I don't know if you saw it, but she actually has interviewed some people there, and they're saying there are definitely actors playing Biden over there, and that there are tunnels under Atlanta studios that go out all over the country. So,
But
to
why is
me,
that relevant? Why would you need tunnels? Because if you've got an actor coming in, they can come in not in the Biden mask. Do you see what I mean? You see, that doesn't make sense. Why
yeah,
would there be tunnels under that studio?
there were tunnels under there because apparently the place was owned by, or it was previously a military owned facility.
Right.
And it's now, and so underneath there, they had military tunnels. So that's how she was explaining that.
Okay.
So I don't know what the tunnels aren't really relevant to what we're speaking about today, but I was really more trying to make the point that she's interviewed some people inside that Atlanta studios this week, and that they are saying that there are actors, a couple of actors playing Biden.
Mm.
So on that basis, if you try and deduct from that what might be going on in different places, it would make sense to me anyway. And it's always been said to me in my channelings that the white hats are in control. In fact, they say to me that the black hats are psychologically in control and the white hats are operationally in control. And I can see that quite clearly. I can see that psychologically, the black hat agenda is what we're all being controlled by. But actually, on the ground, I think the white hats are operationally in control.
So how do you explain then? Because with that, that's really interesting, and I hope
Yeah.
you're right.
Yeah.
But let's get on to the controversial issue of, let's call it the cure.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll call it the cure because the
Okay.
other jab
The
words
other words.
too.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this is still a real contentious issue for everyone. We've seen today in the UK, supposedly, a young lady being the first recipient of the Moderna. We've also seen in the UK today, I just saw it literally as I was waiting for you, Michelle. Apparently, the AstraZeneca have now come out and said under 30s must not take their jab.
Yeah.
But I haven't looked into that in any more detail because that was literally like 2 minutes before we came on screen. But if the white hats are operationally in control, why in so many countries, the UK, the USA, Israel, and I'm not quite sure how it's going over the rest of Israel, of Europe, for example, or the rest of the world, why are we seeing such huge pushes still, and still pushes for cure passports and things like this very much possibly on the cards?
So, I've always been told from a year ago in my channelings that all of that was just a storyline, and that the mandatory passports would never be
Yeah,
allowed. So I think again, this is all just a way of getting people to say no. So if you've heard me speaking on other interviews before, the way I've explained it is that the cure story is multi-layered, because we've obviously got a lot of countries, we've got a lot of companies, we've got a lot of
yeah,
different people and potential roads in
yeah.
terms of supply. So if I look at the thing as an overview now, because I can't tell you what's in every single vial around every single part of the world, but what I have been told repeatedly is that what's inside of those vaccines is benign. And at the most, it's only going to have a flu vaccination in it. And that anything that says mRNA on it, I was recently told that that is been changed into something that would work well with the Tesla healing beds. So I talked about all of this recently on my own channel and with some other channels. I think I talked about it with Nick Veniamin. So I believe that the control that they're issuing at the moment by telling people you can't go back to normal, you can't get your freedom unless you have a vaccine and a passport and you wear a mask and all these things. I think this is a last ditch attempt to get people to say we're not doing it anymore, because people are just very slow. They're just agreeing with everything, and they're not paying attention, because they've already been told that if you take your first cure, you can then go out and what have you, go on holiday. And the first day or week or so after the first rollout, they then introduce the fine. So everybody was putting on my feed, oh, I've had the cure. They were even putting a profile with a banner around it saying I've had the cure, and all excited about it. And then the very next week, they're being told, but if you try and go on holiday, or you try to go out, or you try to socialize, or you whatever, you can't take your mask off. So I think it's just the white hats are using that whole storyline and a lot of storylines to get people to wake up. That's all it is.
Not working, is it?
I think it is working more than we we think, but
Mm.
it's not working as much as we would like, if that
I mean,
makes
I
sense.
do think that I don't believe the figures. Personally, I don't
Yeah.
believe the figures at all that we're told about how many people have had the cure.
Yeah.
Having said that, on a personal level, so I've spoken to at least 20 friends who are on quite the same sort of wavelength as you and I about this whole situation.
Yeah. Yes.
And all of us have got a consistent story that most people they know have had it.
Yes.
So in one respect, now take that in the opposite to how many people do I know who've died of the virus? None. None.
Exactly.
I know people who've said friends of friends. How many people have taken the cure? I know so many. I know very few that haven't. Our little group of people that are talking about things like this obviously haven't. Most other people who are eligible to have it have had it. So there's a massive discrepancy there. I also personally know 4 or 5 people who've got family members who've either died or been hospitalized after it. Again, I knew no one personally from the supposed virus. So that to me raises alarm bells, because even if it was the flu cure, I didn't know that. Now, I know lots of people who've had long-term effects from the flu cure, but not immediate. Not
Yeah.
immediate. So there's something amiss there. There's some sort of misbalance there in terms of what's happening on the ground, in terms of, and
Yeah.
certainly the reports from Israel. But anyway, I mean, we can hope, and there's not a lot we can do about it. And I don't want to sort of labour the point. But for me, I would see that as a very flawed plan if I was a white hat, because the only way it's going to, if everyone has it and nothing happens, then that reinforces how amazing the pharmaceutical companies are. I don't see what it achieves.
I think that when you look at the strategy of everything, it doesn't always make sense, but we are in a war. We are actually in a war between good and evil. And in every war, you will have casualties. So you can't go into any sort of war and not expect to have a casualty. So I think that for the greater good of all, I can understand why they're doing it this way. It does make sense to me.
But if you're
And
saying that, then if they're casualties, there must be something in it that's causing casualties.
so as I said, I don't know what's in every vial around the whole world, but all I've ever been told is that at the worst it would be the flu vaccination,
Right,
and that the mRNA ones had been intercepted
right.
and that the military were actually putting something in the mRNA which was going to actually work with the test for healing. But the mRNA that the military are developing is not available yet. And the MR in their particular the one that they're developing would stand for magnetic resonance. And I can understand why they would be taking that mRNA out and trying to stop it. I don't think any of those are in circulation. And if they are, I don't think there's very many of them. And to answer your question about why are people getting ill, well, I know friends where their parents have had the flu jab before all this happened, and they've been so sick
Mm.
they've ever been. And and they weren't ill before they had the flu jab, and then they
I
took
completely agree with that. I mean, there's a leaked WHO report on the flu jab. There's a leaked one. It's widely available on the internet if people want it.
yeah,
That actually, from a whistleblower at the WHO, that has actually shown that the death rate after that is nearly 0.4%,
yeah,
and
yeah.
that's been around for a long while, and
So
that's been deliberately withheld from the general public knowledge.
how do we know, again, like with the figures, always so far we've been lied to about the figures, which is how
Mm,
they created the pandemic. And
mm,
don't forget, the pandemic also served the white hats, because while they were locking us down, they could get on with other strategies, like the rescuing of the children, like changing the financial system to Nasara Jasara. All those things were benefiting them whilst this pandemic went on.
mm.
um, so how do we know that these, you know obviously it's very sad if anybody dies for any reason, but until we have accurate figures, and not from people that have ulterior motives, everybody at the moment has ulterior motives in terms of statistics. You know, they're either a white hat or a black hat, and there's reasons why they want us to believe figures in different ways. So I think that we can't really rely on,
I
on what
agree
we're
with you
being
on
told.
that, Michelle. That's why I was making the point that about the people I knew personally. So
Yeah,
there's huge discrepancy in terms of that, and that's a very small subset of the population, obviously. So it is,
yeah.
but it's just an interesting one, and I think I just don't see how, as a strategy for waking people up, putting something inert out there, I don't see how that would happen. But let's see and let's hope, because that would be the best possible scenario in my eyes, that that is the case, because then that's the least collateral damage, as you say, that would happen to the general population.
Well, the way I look at it is like this: what is going on is actually just a bad case of the flu. I mean, we know it's a bioweapon, and we know that it's a flu
Mm,
type virus. So it would make sense to me to give everybody a flu jab, because there's nothing you could develop quickly enough, realistically. As we know, it takes years to develop something. So while you give everyone a flu jab, you're sorting out the basic level of what might be going on with this supposed pandemic. But also, what the other side of it is that you are showing people that they can't have their freedoms until they start saying, no, I'm not doing this anymore. So you are kind of killing two birds with one stone if you're a white hat strategist, because we need people to stand up for themselves. Because in the new frameworks that we're moving into, we're not going to have these governments telling us what to do anymore. We're moving from, maritime law to common law. And so we're not going to have these structures that we have now. We're not going to have government set up in the way that it's currently set up. So when all that falls, people are going to have to learn to be sovereign and to start making decisions for themselves. And what this is actually showing right now is that people just will do everything they're told. And the reason that they're carrying this story on so long is that when people actually realize it just was a flu in the future, and that they've been following this storyline, and they're going to get really angry about it, and they're going to eventually, hopefully, say, I'm not doing this anymore. And by then we're going to hopefully have our government falling, and we're going to have these people in a position where their consciousness is high enough to accept this new system that we're moving into. Some of the delays with the Nasara and Jasara are because the consciousness of the world is not high enough yet to accept this new system.
I agree. It's just not, because everyone at the moment is still abstaining from personal responsibility. So whether they think
Exactly.
the government, the pharmaceutical company, their doctor, their employer, I mean, the
Yeah.
amount of people who've said, "Oh, my employer said I had to have it, so I did," and I'm like, really? Really, you're the most uncompliant person in terms of turning up on time, taking sick days, doing this or that, but because your employer said this. And I agree with you. I think there's a huge deficit at the moment in terms of where the consciousness is as a whole and where it needs to be for these new systems to come in place. And even with the med beds, Michelle, I was thinking, it's no good to any of us if we move into these new wonderful things that are available with the consciousness that we can still take no responsibility and a med bed will sort it out. That doesn't change anything, does
Yeah.
it?
Well, I've heard as well that the med beds, you won't be allowed to use them unless you're a certain level of consciousness anyway, probably for that reason.
Mm,
Because if you go round with the mentality that you're a victim all the time, you're making yourself ill a lot of the time by how you repeat your patterns in your mind and your thoughts and your words. So if your consciousness is higher, you generally are aware of how you can help yourself, and how your
mm,
words, thoughts, and actions, what you eat, what you drink, it all affects your health. So, like you said, it wouldn't be any good, putting somebody into a med bed if their whole um, their whole being was not ready yet to make the changes. So, an example would be, I'm a Reiki healer,
mm.
okay, and Reiki healing goes in and helps people on all levels, mind, body, spirit. But at some level, if that person isn't ready to let their patterns go, then that healing can only do a certain amount.
Exactly.
Okay, so and sometimes the healing will allow that person to release the pattern that they're holding on to.
Yeah.
But if that person is determined to stay in a victim mode of I'm sick, I'm in pain, I'm this, I'm that, then it's very hard to break through that, regardless of what type of healing you're giving them. It's only at the point, again, where somebody has been very sick for a long time or addicted for a long time and they hit bottom.
Mm.
If you think about an addiction, people go for years and years and years. And then one day they just like wake up and they say, I have to stop this. I have to stop it. And
Yeah.
it's at that point when they're at that most desperate point that the healing that they then seek, which in this case would be an addiction program, that's when it can work. But if their family had shoved them in there 10 years before when they weren't ready, we all know that it won't work. So
Absolutely.
it's exactly the same with the med beds and this whole story that we're playing out now. So it kind of sounds counterintuitive,
Mm.
but it's making it hard for people because they aren't taking responsibility. And sometimes people have to have things made very hard on them in order for them to make that transition to the point where they're saying,
Yeah.
that's it, I've had enough. A bit like the addiction problem, it's not till they get to that lowest point that they then from somewhere get that strength to say, I have to change this.
It's such
And
a reality, isn't it, Michelle, that the way sort of most human nature works is until it personally starts hitting them,
yeah,
you won't make the changes. And that's part and parcel of our of probably our survival mechanism, really. But it is a wonderful thing to see that when you can sit back and see it in action. But I do think it's nice to also be, I can also see why some people aren't waking up. I do have empathy with some people because, you can see there's a lot of people. Everyone sort of says, well, the data's out there for those that want to reach it. But there's a huge amount of people that don't use social media at all age groups and things like that. And so also there's a lot of people who are going through various different awful things in their lives, and there's only so much you can cope with at once, isn't
yeah.
there? Your self-protection kicks in. But it's going to be wonderful to see. We've got a few things coming up, haven't we? We've had the Ever Given boat, which a
Yeah.
lot of people are talking about. We've also got quite a few legal cases going, both with Dr. Rainer Fulmick on the sort of more global scale, but also in the UK with Michael Benacia, and I call it the Mr. Pizza Express because that's the article I saw where some of the restaurant owners are taking Hancock to court for unfairness of letting schools and supermarkets open but not restaurants, because that isn't supported by the risk data. So we are seeing quite a lot of legal things pop up, and which are, you're getting some reporting in the mainstream media now, aren't we?
I think the other thing to remember is that we don't need 100% of people to wake up. So
Yeah.
going back a year ago, it was told to me that we needed to reach something like 50 to 60%. And we're currently around 35 to 40%. And that,
Really?
so we're getting there slowly. And from the Galactic Federation of Light's viewpoint, they look at it all as a vibration.
Is
So
that
once
globally, Michelle? Sorry, that 35 to 40%, is that globally?
Yeah, so
Okay.
what they're doing is they look at it as a mass consciousness.
Yeah.
They measure what they call the light, the vibration of that consciousness. So once it gets up to a certain level globally, or as a planet, or as a universe even, then the new things can come in. So there's, I think that we've made a lot of progress that we may not have been able to understand till now. But because I work with the galactics, I can see them doing work and lining up the grids, and light workers are obviously linking into that and helping the collective consciousness to rise up. So I think we are getting there. And the other good things that I've been talking to them about is that the Tesla healing, when it's switched on eventually, and I understand that it will initially go on in places like New York and London, that the frequencies of that will also lift the consciousness. So, you know, we've got a few things going on that when they all merge together eventually, you know, it will flip it. It will flip it. But for the moment, we're waiting for, as we keep saying, for the people to start taking some sort of responsibility. But in the same way that the 5G would have emitted a certain frequency that would have been bad for us, the Tesla frequencies, if they were beamed out to society, would have the opposite. So they would help people to lift up their vibration that way. So we've still got that in the pipeline. And when I've been trying to find out about that, they've been saying, as I said, that it will start in major cities like, you know, New York and London, where they will probably switch that on to see how that works. So that's really interesting.
And
So
did you get any timelines on that, Michelle? Because there's a lot of, I'll tell you why I'm asking is I've had a lot of people this week who are on the same wavelength as us, who are very much saying that they're feeling a really weird, not in a good way, energy this week. Really, particular, and actually, I'm sort of more talking about my friends in the UK when I'm talking about that.
So the reason we're having quite a bad week, and I know exactly what they're talking about, because I've had a couple of days where I've woken up and I'm not inside my body. And
Yeah,
I've
same
been
here.
spinning, like vertigo. I've actually been sick. All my dogs have been sick all week. And I think it's because we're shifting into a higher frequency. And the light workers go first. We always go first. We lead everybody else. So if you think of it like we're making grooves on a mountainside, we've gone first up now onto the next groove. And because we've only just arrived, we kind of feel all out of sync. You know, it's another new terrain for us. Our bodies are getting used to it. It's a very fine frequency that we've gone into. So I've heard that that is another timeline shift. And because of that timeline shifts, all the light workers at the front have gone ahead. They're starting to set up that new grade, if you like, that new grade of consciousness. And then we can start pulling the rest of the people up to meet us.
Can I just say something on that? It's really weird, Michelle, because I've had this before in the past, so it's not unique to this situation, but I've had over the last week is I'm absolutely, people think I'm mad, but you don't do well, is at night when I'm supposedly dreaming, I've actually been off doing all that work and it's really bizarre. And then when I wake up, I'm not refreshed at all because I've literally been so busy doing all this overnight, and it's lovely. I mean, I don't mind it at all because I can feel what I'm doing, but it's so nice to have someone you can actually have that conversation with that sort of gets it. But it's the most surreal experience. It's like, I almost thought at first, I was a bit worried because it was almost like I was astral traveling, but I was getting it wrong because I was taking my body with me. If that makes sense.
It does.
So, but it's really fascinating because but anyway, I can guarantee I've been very busy every night so far for the last couple of weeks.
And then you've got the other side of it. So when you sleep really deeply, you're not resting because, as you said, your soul, if you're a light worker, is going off and it's helping all around. It's probably off with the Galactic Federation of Light at night, helping to get those grids in place. And then the other point of being a light worker is if you're not sleeping and you've got insomnia, which is just as bad because you're still not getting any rest, it's because they don't want you to go off tonight. They want you to have a rest from it. So it's kind of, again, it's a bit of a mind twist because you're thinking, I cannot sleep, but you know that the universe is tonight giving you a rest from going off and doing work. But either scenario, you still get to the morning and you just feel like, whoa, I'm so tired. You know, it's like, I don't think I've slept for, 10 years or something.
Exactly. The only thing I laugh about, which is really funny, is the only good thing of it is at the moment I can eat whatever I like and not put on weight because I'm doing all this stuff at night. So it has a few advantages because I do like my food. But no, it's fascinating. There's so much going on, isn't there? And that's really lovely to know that that is going on. And then because from you and I, even the conversation we had off camera before and we started it on camera about how a lot of the people we're interacting with on a daily basis are still very much caught up in the matrix.
Yeah.
But there's these extra tools that can be brought in to push us along a bit if we need that extra help, because certainly some countries are well and truly awake. I mean, you know, a lot of India, a lot of Africa, etc. There's a lot. So when you're, that's why it made sense to me when you said 30 to 40% on a global scale, but I certainly wouldn't, I'm not feeling 30, 40% on a UK scale.
Something else that I've just remembered, I'm just flicking through my pad
Yeah.
while you're talking because I've always got lots of notes. We've been hearing a lot this week about watch the water, and we're always trying to guess what that means. You know, sometimes it's the dams, sometimes they're saying it's the journalists called the waters, and other times it's the Suez Canal.
Other times
But
it's
something
Hunter
that they,
Biden. We've had everything, haven't we?
yeah, but I've actually been given a very different take on what the water means. And the water, they've told me, is literally about our drinking water.
Yeah.
And there's always been a threat, you know, while we're trying to switch on this Nasara Jasara, we are always under some sort of threat, even if we can't see it, as something that could possibly happen to bring that down.
Yeah.
So in the past, we've had the Kennedy shooting and we've had the towers. Now, the enemy now, i.e. the Black Cats, are not as powerful in that respect as they used to be, but they still have certain things at their fingertips,
Mm.
I assume. And one of the things about the mRNA that the military are developing that I told you about was to counteract any future bioweapon
Yeah.
that could potentially be released as a, you know, because of the Nasara Jasara. So the water that they explained to me is one of the places that they think they might try to target.
Mm.
But what they've actually put in place, apparently, is that they've been putting hydroxychloroquine or intend to put hydroxychloroquine into our drinking water. So I was wondering if watch the water might mean that. Because I think that even if we didn't have another bioweapon attack, putting hydroxychloroquine into our drinking water is a much better thing to have in our water than, say, fluoride. I don't know what you think about that, Catherine.
Well,
And you're
as a
a biologist.
biologist, because I've heard other people say this, and
Yeah.
I've heard them say that about the water and also in terms of the spraying from the planes,
Yes.
the chemtrails. Now, as
Yeah.
a biologist, that makes no sense at all.
Okay.
Because just because something's good for you, everything is dose dependent. So you can kill
Yeah.
yourself by drinking too much nettle tea, even though nettle tea is really
I
good
see
for
what
you.
yeah, that makes sense.
So for me to say that is just absolutely, not you, but general as a principle, is
Yeah.
ludicrous, because there's loads of, even though hydroxychloroquine has got many benefits, it's also got interactions and side effects in certain people that shouldn't take it, and there's no way you could control the dose. And whether it's a
So how
plant
does that work with, say, like so just turning that round to like what we've got now, like with
yeah,
fluoride. So
yeah.
how have they been able to, in exactly the same way, put it into the water in a way that it's so subtle that it is affecting obviously people, but not killing them? Well,
Well,
it might actually be killing
yeah,
them. I don't know.
exactly. It will also affect very different people in very different areas. So, for example, when my mother works, we've both got the same water filter, and her water filter ceramic bit goes orange very quickly, because even though we're still getting the stuff from the pipe, she's on a lot of ironstone, whilst
I
I'm
see.
on completely different. So the thing is when they put these things in the water, it will interact with everything else that's in there as well.
Yeah,
Also, what you've got in your home environment, what filtration system, so you
yeah,
can't control it. And that's why you do have hugely different effects in different areas of the country or the world by these things. It's not uniform at
yeah.
all. So if you
Do you
put it
think
in the water, it would be two things. You could put it at such a low dose it would do no harm, but then at that stage it wouldn't do any good
that
either,
that
because
could
everything is
potentially
dose dependent.
That's so interesting, isn't it? Because that was something they channeled down to me, and not being a biologist, I didn't really know everything you've just explained,
Well,
unless
it's
they've
only
got
because I'd heard a lot of people saying that they were spraying it down in the air, and you're just like, oh no, because it interacts with all the molecules in the atmosphere and everything else as well. So it sounds like a nice idea to me, but I can't see on both sides of the scale, it would either be in such low doses it wouldn't do any good,
Yeah.
or it would be of a dose where it could potentially, to some people, do good, but it could also do harm.
So it's funny
So
that you mention about the chemtrails, because I actually talked to Gene Decode about this on email
yeah,
some time ago. I asked him, had they started up the normal chemtrails again? And
mm,
he said no, they had been spraying the hydroxychloroquine.
yes, I heard that. Yeah.
So I don't know if they're still doing that, but I do actually have an email somewhere in my tray where he does actually say that they've been spraying hydroxychloroquine, but I don't know if that was just in America or
Mm.
potentially everywhere. And I assume that that could travel anyway, being in the air.
Absolutely.
But it's
And
quite
it would
interesting.
interact. Yeah, no, it's interesting. And of course, it doesn't mean I'm right, because just because it doesn't make
Yeah,
biological sense doesn't mean that's right. But even the spraying hydroxychloroquine, if you asked most scientists, and please butt in, those of you scientists watching, it
yeah.
wouldn't make any sense that that would be beneficial at all to spray that.
So potentially, though, it could be carried in a liquid like that, say in water. So it would be active still in the water. But what you're saying is that the dosing of it would be difficult. Is that
Well,
what you're
also, and it would interact with everything else in the water, because nothing, just like we don't work in isolation. So we're all connected energetically,
saying?
spiritually, physically. The water is really complex. It's not just H2O. As we know, it's got loads of other chemicals, some intentional and some not
Yeah,
intentional in
yeah,
there. So something like the hydroxychloroquine, it's not an inert substance. It would interact in
yeah,
the air. If it was being sprayed, it would be interacting with everything it's coming in contact with, good and
yeah,
bad, and
yeah,
similarly in the water. So just because you put something in there, it doesn't necessarily stay in that state. Now, I don't know enough about the chemical structure of hydroxychloroquine to know the chemistry of exactly how it would interact with all these different things, but equally it does interact with medications and things like that. So um
So I'm wondering if maybe what we're all getting, these other people as
yeah,
well. I mean, I haven't heard anyone else say that, but obviously you've been hearing that from a few sources.
yeah.
I'm wondering if the principle is going to be the same, but maybe we're getting the word hydroxychloroquine and they have something else up their sleeve.
It could be. It could
Yeah,
be.
I wonder if there's something else they've been developing.
Yeah.
That would be amazing if it was as simple as just
Yes.
putting it in the drinking water. Wouldn't that be a very simplistic way of
It would be amazing. It would
protecting
be.
everybody?
Yeah,
Um,
it would be amazing. And they will have loads up their sleeve that we don't know about. I hope
yeah,
they have. Yeah,
exactly.
I'm sure they have. I'm sure they've got loads of, because we know from the snippets that we've heard about some of the technology that's coming, considering how many patents and things have been hidden, we've only heard about a handful of them. And there's all these other amazing things that they've got knowledge of that the general public, and even, there's so many, where would you start channeling? So I'm sure there are some real plans afoot
Yeah.
to sort of counteract all this, which is really lovely. But
You
it's a
also
lot of
said
people feeling
something.
very tired and drained this week.
I was listening to something you said. I think it was yesterday. Actually, I can't remember which show you were on, but you said something that was quite obvious that I hadn't really thought about, which was the people that have invented this bioweapon, they wouldn't do it without having some sort of patented cure for themselves.
Exactly.
Because obviously, if you're releasing something generally, you could also be prone to it. So if
Your
you're the
family,
person
yeah.
releasing it, you're going to need to have something to protect yourself. So it seems pretty obvious to me, like he was saying, that there is something somewhere to stop all this nonsense because, why would they release it at the risk of harming their own families?
Exactly. They're not the one thing. They're not. It's stupid, unfortunately. And
Exactly.
that is the perfect plan. That was when I was speaking to Charlie Ward about that, because it's all along, when you look at it, you've got to be able to protect the evil geniuses that are doing it, sort of thing.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
and I think that is the hydroxychloroquine and the ivermectin and everything, and all the natural remedies, because obviously you've got the pharmaceutical made hydroxychloroquine, but you've also got it naturally occurring as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, but therein lies the problem, that they've made such a global effort to suppress that. which
Mm.
is just gobsmacking that they've got away with that, really, but
Yeah.
not for much longer. So, Michelle, what do you think? One of the things I'm really fascinated about is, obviously there is quite a lot of fear on both sides of the fence. So there's a lot of really brilliant information coming out about the cure.
Yeah.
I go.
Yeah.
And there's some amazing doctors giving such wonderful, you've got everything from the really complicated scientific explanations to the layman's explanations. So I really feel there's something from everyone there. But what I'm really keen for people to do is sort of say, how can we as humanity and certain people leading the way really move out of that fear state? Because they've been very clever, because almost I don't know what to call it, the truth as the people that can see what has happened, there's a danger that we can be spreading as much fear as the baddies. Does
So
that make sense?
it does, but it's about intention.
Mm,
Okay. So everything is about intention. It's where it starts from. So if you get up today and your intention is to spread a message that creates fear, then that's the frequency that people will hear.
mm,
If your intention is to spread information in a way that it will make people think, I need to look at this closer and go and find out about it, then your intention is to help somebody to help themselves. So it's not that a truther is making the situation worse. It's a bit like this counterintuitive story we've got going on with the white hat, black hats, and we can understand why a white hat would be, putting out back cures and
mm,
all the things that they're doing. We keep thinking to ourselves with our logical brain, why would they do that? And it's because, as I was saying before, it's the same with what the truthers are doing. It's the intention behind it.
mm.
The intention behind it is good. Don't forget, for all these hundreds of years, we've been given information which looks wonderful, it looks amazing. But behind it, the intention has always been to harm us and to
Exactly.
control us. So it's not, again, it's not necessarily what the message looks like, it's what is the intention of the person that's sending it.
Mm,
So, in terms of helping others, if you're a truther, then obviously you need to look at your intention, obviously, as I've just said. And I would imagine that anyone who's in the truther movement, their intention is to help, otherwise, they wouldn't be doing it.
mm,
And from a spiritual point of view, it's your vibration that helps the others. It's not anything that you say. Okay. So if you're resonating at a certain level, it doesn't matter what you say. If the person standing next to you is resonating like this, because it's like they're on radio 4 and you're on radio 1, they just can't hear what channel you're on. Doesn't matter how loud you shout. If you're on radio 1, they can't hear you because they're listening to radio 4. Okay. So all you can do in that situation is you look at your own frequency and you just work every day on bringing in your own light and calming down your own essence. And then, whenever you are in the vicinity of others, because we have an energetic field which stretches out a long way, which we can do even from our homes, we don't even need to leave our homes. We just
absolutely.
imagine that our calm energetic is reaching out through the whole universe, through the whole planet. And as we do that, our frequency, our fine frequency, it goes into our neighbour's house, the person sitting next to us on the bus, although they might be socially distanced, the person that's standing in the queue, and it goes into their energy field. And what it does is it creates like a key. If you imagine like a little key goes into their auric field and it sits there because they're still on radio 4 and you're on radio 1. And that little key will sit there, and it could sit there for a week or a month or a year or 10 years, but it sits there. And when that person is ready to hear, that key switches on, and it switches on them coming over to radio 1 with you. And the thing that switches it on is their consciousness rising up. It's them bringing in more knowledge and wisdom through the light. And if they're not spiritual practitioners, they're still doing that. Everyone is still in connection with a source, even if they're not aware of it. So it will be through things like the truthers saying to them, this information that you're getting is not correct. Please go and look at it, please go and look for yourself.
Mm.
And those that are still deeply listening to channel 4, aren't ready yet, but when the light around them surrounds them from all the light workers, that key will switch on and it will wake them up. So there's a couple of things going on.
Well,
And
also,
these,
this is, sorry, I was just going to say, picking up on that, that's one advantage for some people. I know there'll be people listening that aren't lucky enough for this, but one of the advantages for a lot of people in the lockdown is that a lot of people have spent more time as a family. If you're in a family environment, which for some people is really positive, a lot of people have spent a lot more time in nature. So for example, I live in a beautiful place, where lots of people can come and walk their dogs, and it's absolutely packed, and it's really wonderful to see. Yes, it's
yeah,
crowded, but what's lovely is the whole family's out there walking together, whilst pre-lockdown the kids were at home on their computers. So this, as you were saying earlier about how the lockdown has been very advantageous for the white hats as well, these changes in behavior patterns and people getting on their bikes, getting out in nature, we know those are some of the most important things that people can do to shift their vibration. Loads more people have got dogs. Now, there's issues with that, as we know as well, but we know how healing dog energy is, and how
yeah,
how
yeah.
grounding it is, and how it takes you into the present moment. So there are a lot of these changes of behavioral patterns that should be pushing people up that vibrational scale quite quickly.
You're exactly right, because when people calm down, so they don't necessarily have to be meditating, but just the
Mm,
fact that they're not doing this 9 to 5 rush with the commute, rushing their children to school,
mm,
rushing home to put the tea on, and everything is rush, 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 which, makes your vibration very heavy and very stressed and giving out the wrong, no keys are going to switch on in that situation because you just wouldn't be ready to absorb it.
yeah,
But if you're like you're saying, we're all at home now. We're all through. We have no choice but to, as you said, to fill up the day by maybe going for a walk with our families and our
mm,
pets and doing more leisurely things because it's been imposed upon us. So that then this makes their vibration automatically calm down and become
exactly.
smoother. It's all about frequency. And as their frequency changes, it starts to rise up and change channels. So they might be coming along to channel 3,
Mm,
channel 2, and eventually they might meet us at channel 1. So you're exactly right. There's lots of different things going on that are helping people to meet us. Do you know, I've just got a little funny story I want to tell you about an animal. Can I tell you a funny story about an animal?
yes, yeah,
Is
please
that
do.
all right? Have we got time?
Yeah, I've got about another 5, 7 minutes before I've got to get ready for the next one. Yeah, lovely. I'd
So
love to hear it.
okay, so I'm obviously like trained in healing. I'm
Can
a
you show
Reiki
you who's
master
listening to
and
you? Can you
teacher.
see Pumpkin?
Oh, hello.
Isn't he magnificent? He's been listening to everything. Yeah.
How amazing. So I'm a trained Reiki master and teacher, and I used to live in Spain. And when I first came back to the UK, I'd moved into this small sort of town, didn't know anybody. And the lady across the road had said, "Oh, come over for coffee like you do when someone moves in."
Mm.
So the next day I went across and I was sitting in the chair in the lounge, and this really big poodle walked in, those very large poodles,
Yeah,
and
the
it came
standard ones.
across, and I was sitting in quite a low chair. So its head was sort of directly looking at me like this. And it said, as I'm speaking to you right now, can you help me? And I literally like looked round because I wondered where this voice was coming from. So this is going back probably about 18 years ago. And I suddenly realized the dog was saying to me, could I help the dog?
Mm.
So when the lady came back in, I said, um, I said, I know this is going to sound very weird, but I'm a Reiki healer, and your dog has asked me to help it. And would that be okay? And she said, yeah, this is my mum's dog. I'm actually looking after it for the week, and she's on holiday. Why don't you come over tomorrow and you can have some time with this dog? So I came over the next day, and the dog, as soon as I started to switch on the healing, laid down and was chatting away to me,
Mm.
Catherine. As I was doing the healing down its back, it was saying, "Oh, that's just amazing. That's so amazing," like this. And what I'd noticed the day before was that it had been crying a lot. And I'd actually said to the lady, "Do you know why the dog has been crying?" And she said, "No, it's always been like that since my mum had the dog." So as I was sorting out the aches and pains of this big poodle, and it was saying it loved it and it was helping, I asked it in my mind, why have you been crying? Because with my connection to animals, I know that animals do cry.
Mm.
And this dog said, "Because no one can hear me. No one can hear me." So I put my hands around like what would be the throat, and I started to heal this area. And the dog just kept saying, "No one could hear me. No one could hear me." And I just kept on with the healing session, and it went very nicely. And at the end, the lady came back in, which was the daughter-in-law, and I said, "Well, I've done the healing on your dog's back legs, because obviously it was having pain there standing up, but it kept saying that it was having tears in its eyes because nobody could hear him." And she said, "How did you know that?" And I said, "Well, the dog told me,"
Mm.
which is a bit strange to tell your new neighbor, but I said the dog kept telling me no one could hear him. And she told me that the story of this dog was that it had previous owners before her mother, and they had moved house, and they had left the dog in the house. But before they had gone, they'd taken its voice box out. So when it was barking frantically to let somebody know it had been left behind, so on top of the trauma of the family leaving the poor thing, it now couldn't tell anyone because obviously the dog would bark to warn you.
Mm.
And this dog had been crying for all those years. They'd had this dog about 3 years because it was trying to express this
Mm.
pain of being left. Anyway, after that, the good news is that after that day of healing, this dog never cried anymore
Oh.
because where I'd been able to connect with it and talk it through with this dog, it was like it just needed somebody to hear because no one had ever heard. Kept
Mm.
saying, "No one could hear me. No one could hear me." Because I was saying, "Why had you been crying? Why have you been crying?"
Mm.
As soon as this dog felt like someone had heard its story, it was totally, all this crying that had been constant just stopped. And when the mother came back from her holiday, she said that this dog, who had been having problems with the back legs and the hips, was just running like a puppy. She'd never seen anything like it. So it's just a story again of something I thought you'd like to hear because I know you work with animals and
Yeah, I mean, I'm exactly the same. I mean, every day it's just so many stories where they just completely incredible. One, animals are so receptive to healing. Secondly, they're so desperate for us to listen to them because they're communicating with us all the time, as you and I
right,
know,
yeah,
and as every child knows as well. It's just, as you say, us being able to hear them. And also, they're desperately trying to help us all the time as well.
yeah,
And I completely agree with you. I know animals definitely cry because when I was working with the elephant orphans in Zambia, they literally cried real
oh,
tears, when we
yeah,
were doing it. But
yeah,
um, but equally, they had such amazing resilience. And what was so lovely about them is the Zambian keepers who were looking after them had the best animal communication skills you could ever hope for. They wouldn't have called themselves animal
no,
communicators because to them it's completely
natural,
natural. It's
yeah,
not a skill, it's just a skill that they all possess because they had such empathy and such a close bond with the elephants, and they were just absolutely incredible. But again, that was what's so lovely because it's a bit like you were talking, we've got to a stage where perhaps the way most people live in England or America, where they think some of these things that we're talking about, I was talking to Janine yesterday about talking to trees. And,
yeah,
it's a standing joke in our family with my children and with my husband, for ever since I can remember, 20, 30 years, if we're not sure about it, it's a common thing. We just say to each other, well, let's go and ask the trees.
yeah,
And that's not abnormal in our family at all. We've always done it. But and it's not abnormal in Zambia and it's not abnormal in
no,
the Aboriginals. But what's really lovely is a lot of these things are being brought back up again and becoming much more accepted as normal again, having us all been completely weird for so many years. you can see that shift now about how more and more people are seeing the benefit of it, and it's just beautiful. You know, my dream is that from now moving forward, everyone truly understands that they really can communicate with their animals, and therefore, can you imagine the better world that it's going to be for every animal and person on this planet?
I can definitely hear plants, crystals,
Yeah.
animals, obviously people's souls. But you know, when I go to my doctors, he never this it's funny because doctors are healers, but their plants are always, when I go in there, going because they're
Mm.
so dry.
Yeah.
So whenever I go to the doctors, I secretly like give the plants a little bit of water while I'm there, because they are literally screaming for a
I can't
drink,
bear that.
you know, and I can hear them. And you know, if friends of mine say they've bought a plant or a flower, and I might not even be in their house, I can hear the plants chattering. They all have
Exactly.
they have like especially if they're like flowers, like little tiny flowers, they sound like people chattering. So, and crystals can give you information. I mean, there's
Oh,
so much.
good. I've got mine here. Well, I've got
Yes,
loads, but this is the one I've got today with
yes.
me. I just,
So
I carry them everywhere, and it's just fantastic.
when my crystals are going out to in the sun, they chuck, they get excited. You know,
Exactly.
they laugh. They, oh, good, we're going out in the sun. You know.
It's such fun, you see. You know, it's fine at this time when half our human friends have deserted us for being complete nutters. I've just got my plants in the background. I'm quite happy
They're
talking
all
to them with
chatting.
pumpkin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Got
Oh,
the aloe vera behind you,
yeah.
the really big one. He's got a really deep male voice. Like he's really in charge of that room.
I've got two there actually. There's two big aloe vera. There's one big and one which I think is more of a feminine one behind
Yeah.
it, just
The,
behind the salt lamp.
the really big one is
Yeah,
has got a very strong male voice. You
yeah,
can hear him. He's very, you know, very deep, sort of in
yeah,
control. He's like overseeing everything.
yeah.
So that's, you know, but if you can't tell everybody these things because you just would sound to them,
I know it's
you
just
know,
wonderful,
completely
but I
different.
am noticing there's more and more. Well, I suppose it's the people like you that I'm connecting with,
Yeah,
that you know you can have this as a completely normal conversation. And what it's really interesting is seeing like Pumpkin, who's next to me.
yeah,
He's always by the salt lamp and always by the aloe vera. And you know, it's again, it's just that we can learn so much, can't we, from the
exactly.
animals and the
Yeah,
plants and
yeah,
everything. But I love it, and I get so excited when it's a sunny day and I can take the aloe vera outside to sit in the sun. I love it. It
yeah.
gives me as much pleasure as it gives them. It really
Exactly. Yeah,
does.
because
Yeah.
they love it and they tell you. I mean,
Yeah.
another thing a few years ago was a horse sanctuary that I'd never met the owners. They were in the south of England. They had found out about me through a friend, and what they used to do was send me a picture of a particular horse
Mm,
that was they were having problems with, because quite often the vets would miss what was the real problem was. So
absolutely.
they would send me a picture first to try and get into to talk to the animal to find out where the problem was in the body,
Mm,
because a lot of these times they can be emotional problems
mm,
with a horse. And this one day, they sent me this horse and said they were having a lot of problems with it on this sanctuary that they had. So I tuned into him, and he came across with this very military style voice, you know, and he talked to me in a military way, like a general or a colonel might
mm,
talk. And I said to him, so, you know, what's going on? You know, why are you playing the sanctuary up? Why are you not calming down, enjoying your life? And he said to me in a very abrupt, sort of general way, that he was so bored, he had nothing to do.
mm,
So I went back to the sanctuary and I said, it seems that he's just really bored. Do you know what his previous life was? I said, he sounds like he's sort of some sort of military general, and he just needs something to do. He said he's normally up at 6 and he's doing things, and you've got him stuck in a field, he said. And they said, oh, how did you know? And I said, well, what do you mean? And they said he'd been rescued from, not rescued, but he'd been retired from a military
yeah.
role, and they had just put him in a field thinking he would like to retire because he'd had a busy life. But as soon as they realized that this was actually making him unhappy, I said, well, why is there anything else he could do, you know, like where
Mm,
he feels of service, because his whole life he's been in service.
mm.
So they put him on children's rides, And as soon as they did that, he was completely well behaved. His
Mm.
whole temperament changed because he was being got up each day. He was being got ready, and he was doing something of service, and it completely changed this horse.
I'm so
So
with you on that. It does a
yeah,
lot, and a lot of them feel like that. You know, a lot of, because what people think is natural for a horse isn't, because we don't have any natural environments. In a natural environment, if you were to turn them out in, 500 acres of mixed land so that they could really go and be a horse and explore, then that would be different. They wouldn't need a human job.
yeah,
But unfortunately, you turn them out in a square paddock, it's just absolute torture. It's like putting a rabbit or guinea pig in a hutch, isn't it? So I'm
and
going to have to go now, Michelle,
okay,
because I've got the thing. I could literally talk to you all night.
okay.
That's so, so lovely. Thank you so much. And I,
Nice to
I
see
think,
you again.
certainly I think what's lovely is there's so many positive things that everyone can do themselves, aren't there, in terms of, however frustrating the lack of perceived progress is, hopefully people have got a few hints of things that they can be doing to make themselves feel better.
Yeah, I think it's coming. I think it's a bit slower than we probably would like, but I am feeling and seeing changes. And as I said, I've had a bit of a drastic week with these energy,
Yes.
changes and shifts. So those only happen when the collective is ready to come with us. So
Yeah.
that's a good sign. So if we're getting up every day, Catherine, and we're spinning through vertigo and
Yeah.
feeling sick and everything that goes with it, that's a really good sign, because that means that the collective are ready to come up to meet us.
Oh, it's wonderful, isn't it? Thank you
Yeah.
so much, Michelle.
Yeah.
Have a fantastic rest of the week. I think, even though it's cold here, I think spring
Yeah,
is.
we've had some snow actually.
Did you? We only had a few flutters. In
Yeah.
the south, we think it's hysterical. It doesn't set. But my friend in Scotland sent me some pictures, and she's got really deep snow. I'm a little bit worried about the lambs, so I hope it warms up, because all the baby animals,
Oh,
obviously,
okay. Yeah.
I can't, that's why you'd like to be able to relax. I was driving back up to my son to uni today, and you can see all these tiny little lambs in the field,
Oh,
and you're thinking,
yeah.
oh, bring the sun out for them. But hopefully it will be on its way again very soon.
Okay.
Oh, lovely.
Lovely to see you.
It's so lovely to see you as well. Have a fantastic evening, and we will
Thank
catch
you.
up soon.
Yeah. Okay. See you
Lots of
soon.
love.